Zvuk misli.
Podcast Instituta za filozofiju i društvenu teoriju.
Zdravo svima, dobrodošli u 22. epizodu Zvuka misli, podcasta Instituta za filozofiju i društvenu teoriju. Današnja epizoda nosi naziv Salvaging Buildings i već sam naziv epizode ukazuje da ćemo se vrlo uskoro prebaciti na engleski jezik, zato što je danas sa nama moj prijatelj i kolega Onur Đeritoluom. Welcome, Onur.
Thank you for inviting.
Onur is an architect and urban researcher, independent researcher who recently got his PhD defended, and we will be talking about his book that came out of his PhD project, and that is as well called Salvaging Buildings. So, Onur, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to talk about your book that is forthcoming, actually. So maybe because the topic of your book is, I don't want to say exotic because that's very frowned upon in our research circles, but is for sure unusual, at least for a majority of our listeners. So maybe let's try to paint a picture or like a landscape of construction in Turkey and actually material reclamation and the context of Turkey that we're dealing with.
Okay, thanks for the interest. So I can begin with, so Istanbul is like a really big city, 15 million people live in Istanbul. And Istanbul is like basically in two sides of the intersection of Europe and Asia, and there are two sides in the city. To start with, there was a process when Istanbul started to densify, urbanize. Most of part is urbanized with informal architecture, or if we don't want to use informal and formal dualism, we can say, let's say, popular urbanism. It's a term often used when it's being referred to as urbanization trends in the global south, also Balkans. We can think about that in that way. So the people basically, there wasn't enough, state couldn't provide housing for the people, and when the city is like going through industrialization, around the factories, the people, basically workers, built their own homes with basically from materials that they can find, and really basic shelters in the beginning.
And what time are we talking about right now?
We are talking about like starting from 50s until 2000, late 2000s, okay. Let's say, because then this kind of housing is like legally not possible. Like it's really defined illegal now, and you can't find new settlements in Istanbul anymore.
So what was the problem with that housing besides that it was
actually
built out of need?
Built out of need, and then when so people bring their own infrastructure to these neighborhoods, and it's just the effort of like solidarity networks, which is like kind of connected to migration routes or where they migrate from, and then they basically develop the neighborhoods, and I would say the state without any cost solved the housing problem. And these places are potential voting areas. So in each election, starting from 50s, 60s, there was a promise of that they will get their ownership of their lands. So time by time.
So they built on public land.
Yes, public land, because most of the land belonged to the empire. Let's say when we think about the early Republican times. So most of that was during Ottoman times. Most of the land was belonged to Ottoman Empire, and they were giving this away to to the public to either farming or to all sort of agricultural activities. And then this land is like basically owned by the state. There were some special cases with private ownership, but most of them were public. And then people got the ownership, so these were basically one floor really basic village houses,
containing individual families.
Individual families. And then when the people get these deeds, let's say land deeds, they build extra floors on top of that, or totally demolish and make this like kind of a apartment look, but really lacking sufficient efficient let's say materials, like especially when we think about they are concrete buildings. And then so these neighborhoods became major ones in Istanbul, and then of course on the other part there are like some more, let's say, economically advantaged neighborhoods as well. There's also a kind of like apartments there, from Ottoman mansions into apartments. So I'm talking about mostly like this late 90s processes now, like when there's this really strong liberalization of the economy, let's say, opening up to more global finance, capital.
Yeah, but there was like a similar process in our context of Yugoslavia, basically, because there was a huge housing crisis after the Second World War. A lot of the housing fund was demolished during the war, basically, and there was a lot of migration to big cities and new industrial cities, and then the state was through, and especially after the introduction of self-management, kind of through publicly owned companies providing housing to workers. But the equation of how you collect like the points to get the apartment in one of the housing complexes or the like large housing estates would take into account, is your like vocation kind of in deficit on the job market, which would basically mean if you are more educated, you would get your apartment much faster, much quicker than manual workers. And then state realized that they cannot provide fast enough apartments for everyone. So they will then, allow this self-building on the public land. And that similar type of construction was also very dominant, I would say, during 70s and 80s amongst like a lower social strata, or like the working class in Yugoslavia. So then it was kind of paradoxical. You would think that like a middle class would live in houses and that workers would live in apartment buildings. But the situation was actually the opposite. So, and then after 2000s, it was then, of course, same as you mentioned, legalized, and then infrastructure was partly introduced even during the 80s. We talked about this in one of the other episodes. If listeners want to recall, it's on housing questions with Rory Archer and Danilo Ćurčić. So we already covered that. But
thanks for the link, because it's really important to make these parallels when thinking about.
And for ones that can imagine how it looks like, think of Kaluđerica or Veliki Mokri Lug. When we're talking about Belgrade, those are the self-built houses, and because people were workers, they already had all the trades to build the houses by themselves or through solidarity networks with their relatives and friends and so on.
So during this time, and when we come to late 2000s, there's like a really big earthquake happened close to Istanbul, and it showed this building stock, which is both built like middle class or worker class, let's say, they are not strong enough to survive a really strong earthquake, like above 7 Richter scale.
And how many, like, is there an estimate how many of buildings are in danger of an earthquake?
There are but statistics, but I'm not sure like I can give it, but if you read the book there you can find the statistical, but it's quite big, like it's nearly, I can say, more than half of it has to be renewed in Istanbul, so it's quite a big number of buildings. So in the 2000s, so there's this urban renewal project started, which is basically demolishing, which means construction, demolishing the existing apartment and then building a new one. So during this transformation, it's also give a way to add some extra floors to the apartments, and you can create more units to be traded or to be kind of in the market, real estate market. And also it's a way to finance this transformation. Basically, the constructor can own the extra floors, and then they can finance the construction with this selling of the extra floors. And then because the owners couldn't really cover all of the costs.
It seems expensive, but where do families stay during this rebuilding?
So this stayed in the beginning. They were giving like support for rent, but when the number is high, this much, the state money wasn't enough for this transformation. So basically, there are also stories that people where at some point the constructions couldn't finish, or the construction company was bankrupt, and then people find themselves homeless, like renting, even though they have they own a flat. So there are also stories like that. So so this is the, let's say, the context, and so there are like parallel levels, like the liberal transformation, the earthquake question, and this let's say organic way of urbanization, referring to that people actually by their own resources build the houses. And this demolition and all Istanbul is turned into somehow a construction site, a big, very big site.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of waste.
Yeah, a lot of waste. Exactly. That's the point that I was trying to come. So this construction waste. So this phase that the building is going through, like the building has to be get rid of really fast, and then it's like no different than it's like a more larger commodity, let's say, and then it has to be renewed in a way, and then. There's really a big material transformation also beyond this economic transformation, let's say. And then, and at that point, I was interested in what is happening, all this materials.
Yeah, how does the building disappear?
Yeah, exactly. And then, which is not kind of paid attention to. So, because the cost of, or the profit from the new building is more important for the constructors, and it is something to be like really fastly get rid of, demolished, the rubble goes somewhere, and then, but of course, the building itself is an assemblage of many systems, like sewer system, electric system, plumbing, and
walls.
And there are like a lot of materials could be recycled within this the circular economy, let's say. And in Istanbul, or in generally in Turkey context, the circular economy context is not like it's this like Western or more when you think about European system of recycling, that everything has its own place and everything is recycled. In Istanbul, for instance, the waste is not separated. So and then and also this demolitions based on the earthquake was happening, but at the same time, when the city was transforming in the 70s and 80s, the inner city also changed, and there were like big industrial buildings used to be, and these were also demolishing, and then so through my research, I learned that the demolishers who were active in the 70s, demolishing these factories and more infrastructural buildings, they were also selling materials to the let's say informal architecture or like these houses that people that built. So there was like they were like kind of reclaiming some bricks, some concrete metals, and
So
they
there's
were
like a second-hand market of
already-
construction material.
yeah, it's already started in the 70s,
70s.
in the 70s, and also there were like some demolitions to modernize the city center, let's say, and they were like opening of big boulevards. So when Istanbul is like used to be the capital of Ottoman Empire, and the city is like quite organically developed. So there is like the streets were smaller. When the city modernized, or this modernization idea of a city came, they had to open really big boulevards, and some Ottoman buildings also demolished, or like housings. And there you can see, you can find like bricks or like window frames, and what you can be used in this popular architecture, let's say, that people build their own houses. So it started there, already the second-hand market, and with this recent demolitions, the second-hand market, it's changed in a way that the materials are more kind of result of industrial production, plastic, PVC frames, or metal doors, which is kind of like fabricated in that sense.
And then you actually decided to follow one of these elements.
Yeah. The idea was that. So this, when we think about the process of demolition, there is a kind of self-managed dismantling process. So scrap dealers who were like basically collecting scrap in the street, they started to come into this building transformation, and they were taking away all this parts, for example, window frames, I said before, doors, or like this copper wires, or elevator parts. So they were kind of like gathering the materials that could be given to the recycling factory, like copper,
Sold, yeah.
Copper or plastic, and at the same time they had the second-hand market only for building components. So there's like two-way, like
radiators. Or
yeah, exactly. Radiators, metal bars that you can use, or to put for security bars and stuff like that. So there are like two channels that they can. So they were kind of giving materials to the circular economy. They were like kind of doing the collection part of the work and storing, and then they were like has this second-hand market, which is kind of like compared to the formal, or like let's say first-hand materials. It was less controlled, or less regulated,
yeah.
Let's say, or like they were giving it's like how they were. It's on the books. It's undefined.
Yeah, it's informal.
Also,
yeah.
It's informal, like it. And then, so I looked at these people who are doing this job. So I was kind of, while I was following this materials as well, I was looking at their lives. So through the second-hand market network, one material, I found out that most of the materials were like being sold to the villages, kind of secondary houses, like village houses, summer houses, like kind of repair, maintenance, construction. And before, it was giving to this people who were building their homes during the industrialization period, this informal architecture, let's say. And now the materials were not focused, the second-hand materials weren't in the city, and they were taken out of Istanbul, more kind of Istanbul's territory, also Anatolian villages.
Yeah, in your book you actually have a map of this,
Yeah.
like migration of materials.
Yeah. So there are like two flows that I focus. One is like this flow of people, let's say, because they are not full-time doing this salvaging, let's say, building salvaging. They were also half-time farmers. So they came with this migration wave, many generations, maybe at least 2 or 3 generations. And then they started scrap dealing or scrap collecting. And then they were also connected to their villages, so they were going back and doing.
So it is usually men who come to city to do this kind of work.
Yeah, it's kind of heavy, and you have to
hard
lift up
labor. Yeah,
hard labor. And I never came across the woman who was doing this. And because of more construction work is like, let's say, defined
but
as
the
a heavy
women
job.
and children stay in
In
the
the
village taking
villages.
care of the farm.
Yeah, in
like-
a way, or the elders,
Yeah.
let's say, but they most of doing the care work in the village, and some of them also bring their wives, but they also stayed in the flat in Istanbul. For instance, they were doing mostly
cooking,
care
washing.
work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is the first flow of people who are like traveling back and forth, and also like what kind of in a construction for instance, the window frames or doors were used. I was also looking at, and so I found out that most of the village houses were mostly, well, they are using new bricks and concrete, of course, but the facade works or like heater systems were kind of, or the kitchen cupboards were taken from this demolition from Istanbul, for instance. And during the research, I also find that Georgian, so Turkey has a border with Georgia, and Georgian like, let's say, traders were coming with their trucks and visiting these yards, scrap yards, and taking these materials to Georgia and selling there.
So the windows are now crossing borders.
Yeah. So it was. So I also visited Georgia, and there also more or less similar to the Serbian context. There's this. After the Soviet Union, there's a housing shortage, and there are like the existing, let's say, housing blocks, called micro-rayons. They were also went into this unrecognized or informal process of changing, modifying, and basically they added extra floors, they added extensions to the buildings, and this kind of like affordable cheap materials are using there also. And this second-hand Georgian trader had had a scrapyard close to this area. But of course, like this, let's say, supply of second-hand materials also dependent on the economic situation. And at the moment, the current situation, the construction sector is kind of the main
like
force of the economy of Turkey, and a lot of investment in that direction, also globally. I mean, global finance also focusing on giving or investing on that. And but at the moment, because of the post-corona situation, the war situation, which is also kind of nowadays growing in different parts of, for instance, now is Palestine is like going through that. Because of this situation, the economy is not kind of supplying money for construction. So the second-hand demolitions are like more rare at the moment, and the second-hand material flow is kind of slow down. But it doesn't mean that it's finished, because there is this really strong need because of this earthquake. And I must say, earthquake is one of the major agency here, because again this year there was in different part of the Turkey there was a recent earthquake, and that showed also the buildings which are supposed to be seismically strong were built with insufficient materials, and they were like many
so
people
it
died.
triggered a new wave in.
So this need also, this earthquake being expected in Istanbul, there's this need to renew or demolish is like really high at the moment.
And like what maybe or who in a way influenced your research process, like from a theoretical perspective, or what did you found out that was later applicable? Maybe that can also be interested to some of our listeners if they are students, or how do they, connect something that is very tangible like this with some, like abstract theoretical thinking.
Yeah, I looked at assemblage thinking. I was really looking at the literature on popular urbanization, informal urbanization in the global south. So there are, for instance, Colin McFarlane, he kind of interpreted assemblage theory into how these instances of more local, more microeconomic situations, what is the role of materials in terms of how houses being formed. Because in this case, when people building their own houses, it's kind of like a gathering process. So people, there are like many layers. So it's this kind of perspective more discusses the agency of materials or agency of things. And it's a nice framework to also look at not only materials, but also like non-human factors like earthquake or like climate change and environmental discussions, and which is the kind of like really major discussion because of the scarcity of resources. Like so it's like getting really scarce, and rather than a top like overarching thinking or overarching theory, is rather than like kind of focus on the field work and then trying to kind of look at the everyday situations or everyday struggles in a way.
In that sense, your work is really, truly ethnographic.
Yeah, ethnographic. Yeah, it's the methodology is ethnography, and which is kind of like, I'm not an ethnographer, so I had to kind of dig into this methodology by myself and trying to get this knowledge through my colleagues or like in parallel discussions. And so ethnography is also kind of major, and this also this follow the thing methodology, which is kind of again to look at the trade chains, trade networks, global trade networks, when the industry is kind of because of cheap labor went to the global south, let's say, and then it is also following to see more networked planetary situation in the process of a product.
Yeah, you're providing a lot of context throughout, not just like immediate, but also like how global dynamics is influencing
a product. And then my follow the thing is like more focusing on the second-hand material flows, and also discuss how this affected the course of the research in that sense.
Yeah, but by following the thing, or basically PVC window frames, you also follow the people. And those people are, or the scrap collectors are called çıkmacıs.
Yeah, çıkmacıs, which is kind of çıkma means in Turkish, which is kind of displaced or removed or dismantled.
So like removers
or reclaimers, let's say, we can say. And of course, these materials are not moving there alone, But still, when I was discussing agency of materials, there are things also discussed in the book, like, for instance, asbestos. In demolition, most of the stock which is built in 80s has this asbestos.
They still use it,
That time it's forbidden now, but it was used. So I also discussed this kind of like materials which are not paying attention to in kind of Turkish context, and because in order to make these processes faster, some of the regulations are not controlled properly, and these people who are, for instance, the first person who hits a hammer to the building demolition in the demolition process are çıkmacıs, and they are not really informed about the effect of asbestos, for instance, in their health, which is kind of turned into cancer, a long process. After 15 years, you'll see the effects. And also during our workshop, we didn't mention it, so this podcast is after the workshop that we have done. And there also we were, it was into question, this waste collectors in Serbia, also their health expectancy is like 47 years. Yeah. So this for paying more agency to things and thinking about, for instance, asbestos or PVC production, plastic production,
or probably a lot of air pollution from demolition.
Air pollution. Also, the in the circular economy is not a green green economy. I mean, because the incineration processes are, for instance, the burning of the cables and to get the copper inside. This has to be like kind of controlled. In this case, the state or like private factories, but it's not like really truly paid attention to. So I'm in the book discussing that. Also, also I'm looking at how it affects this materials affects architecture, let's say, and
but also as an anthropologist, I'm also interested in buildings and objects, but of course at the same time people are maybe my priority. So what about the çıkmacıs? How are they organized? Are they divided in like different subgroups? Some groups deal exclusively with metal, some with door frames, some with furniture, or it's a mixture as well. How do they how is their everyday labor organized, and how maybe this like very precarious and invisible work affects their everyday lives and lives of their families?
So this collecting waste and separating it, it's divided, let's say, from street collecting. The waste pickers, they collect bottles, cardboard, and mostly known as papermen.
So are the scrap collectors on the street also called çıkmacıs?
No. I'm trying to give an overall picture of this, and then I come to çıkmacıs specifically. So there are the street collection is done by papermen, let's say, and it's also assigned to minorities, Kurdish minorities, which are kind of displaced because of war conflict between.
As here, it's kind of job of Roma population,
which
in
is
Serbia.
kind of displaced in a way, and çıkmacıs, they are more kind of because scrap is not like waste. Like I'm talking about more municipal waste. When you think about scrap, it is kind of owned with someone, so there's a kind of a monetary exchange between çıkmacıs and the constructors. So they buy scrap material in a way
from the constructor.
When during this demolition
like they
process,
get rights to dismantle the building.
Okay. Exactly. And then that's the difference. And most of them are family businesses or related to former villagers. Like one village is doing just scrap dealing. So there are a lot of professions like that. One village who migrated just doing the bricklayers, for instance. There are like certain, because of these waves and long history of migration, people when they get to a bigger city, it's very easier for them to enter to the sector through a relative
yeah,
and or known. it's mostly like a family business,
Mhm.
and like uncles, brothers are doing this job, and so they also take furniture from the buildings which are left by the tenants before the demolition. So they take the furniture and sell it in the flea market. They take the window frames or door frames and components like that in the second-hand market, and electric copper wires and stuff in the circular economy, let's say.
Mhm.
And when there's more demolitions, let's say, they bring their relatives from the village, and their workforce is kind of extending. And with the recent, not recent anymore, nearly it's 10 years, this Syrian war, they also hire Syrian workers.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, unfortunately, the labor becomes more cheaper.
Mhm.
If you work with
With-
Afghani or Syrian refugees, which is also for the refugees, it's easier for them to enter such business because already it's in the field of in the gray zone area.
Yeah, and then they're doing like the more of a manual labor
Manual
part, and
labor.
not dealing and.
Yeah, and it's not that easy for them to get a proper work permit.
Yeah.
This might have changed because of the populist regime. Because I heard also a lot of Syrians become Turkish citizens in order to vote. And so this is also a field of like this kind of relations when we look at like this human organization in that business. Yeah, so if I answered your question about the focus on this labor part of the work. And as I also described, since they also do farming, and farming business is also like...
So is it like seasonal? Like a season of dismantling and season of farming?
In a way, yes. So it's seasonal work. So, but the family that I've focused specifically, they were owner of their lands in their village, and they were kind of imagining to go back when they are retired. To go back, and they wanted to upgrade their houses there, and they would prefer to be there because the conditions that in Istanbul, for instance, in some cases they had to live in their depots, like where they store the materials. So it's like a kind of, the depot is like, in one part of the depot there's this kind of a dormitory with like bunk beds. So it's like really
really poor working
workers and precarious living situation. But when I observed, like when I visited their villages, they have actual houses, and they have also access to space, let's say, or like access to their culture there, and they feel more happy there. But unfortunately they are like small scale farmers, and they are also like this difficulty that also this farming also being taken over by the cooperatives, companies. And so also that land also is kind of questionable that they can sustain that farming part as well, or like they had to be always bound to this seasonal work in the city in a way.
Is there like a specific part of Turkey where the Chikmajis come from? Or they come from all over?
Mostly like central Anatolia, around Nevşehir, around Kayseri, which are like the kind of central big cities in below Ankara. And that's what I've... I mean, of course, if a broader research made with more participants, maybe who find this more accessible, can also be from somewhere else.
Yeah, of course.
I try to avoid generalizations, but most of the scrap businesses like Nevşehir, Niğde, these areas from Turkey.
And were there maybe some attempts to regulate this, let's say, part of economy? Like, or maybe to privatize it completely?
Yes and no. Yeah, privatization is like at stake. Like it's also people are kind of the street collectors that I mentioned, which is separate from çıkmacas, like street pickers are kind of in the danger because there are private companies who are taking over this collection and separation and recycling in the
same as the Bottleman movie.
Yeah, exactly. But with scrap dealers, it's a different case because there's this kind of like a monetary exchange. Like there's this buying or buying the rights of to scrap deal. But one can think that it could be also it's precarious because I mean the processes are really kind of fragile in that sense. Of this kind of this part of informal labor and precariousness and yeah, but they have a knowledge of dismantling, and if somebody starts a formal business model and hires them as workers, or I don't know like how it can be formulated, but it goes in the direction of more capitalist.
I was just thinking more that if that would maybe provide more like a security on the work site, or like if some accident happens, then some company is responsible, or like if you get injured during dismantling of something, how that sort of
I mean it's for the dismantling process. I think at least they could be properly checked for if they are using proper gear. Proper uniforms, because it's
like
just
protection helmets and adequate shoes, belts, things like that. They
use shoes, thankfully, but other stuff they were unhappy because it's kind of stopping them to move fast. So they cannot be as efficient as, and also the construction company doesn't check properly, so it's like it's quite dangerous for this really 1 week long process of dismantling. Is really short, but it's not checked.
Wait, you're saying that the building disappears in 1 week?
No, this dismantling process is like 1 week. In some cases, maybe the demolition is 1 week, maybe, but it's maybe like I can say 3 weeks or something, this demolition, because they are not allowing machinery now in the city center. They have to be done by hand. So it's slowed down.
Wait. Yeah. How do you mean by hand?
Like by really using
like entire like few stories apartment building to dismantle it, but with the hammer.
Yeah, like at first
I'm sorry. I imagined a dynamite.
No. Like
because of the seismic. Or like
well, it's like neighborhoods, so there's no dynamite.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course,
it's like the city is very like dense.
Yeah.
And for instance, if you share a wall, buildings share walls. Let's say.
So yeah, it would harm the other building.
Yeah. So dynamite is not the option. So what they do is like, in the first phase, they open holes in the floor to let the rubble go down, and this is done by hand. And sometimes they put a really small size excavator, like this machine, and then they put it down slowly. And it's like 3 weeks, maybe 1 month process. But this dismantling process is just maximum 1 week. The work of çıkmacas.
Okay, well, I didn't imagine this was happening by hand.
Yeah.
Okay. And where does this, I mean, if you know that's I know that's not topic of your research, but where does this like old bricks and parts of concrete that part, like construction part, where does that go? You cannot do anything with that.
So that rubble can be used under the asphalt roads as a layer before putting the asphalt, the road actual. And there are like dumping sites all around Istanbul, and they are basically in the periphery of the city, close to the nature, and it's like kind of expanding each time, and like eating from the forests and other natural resources in a way, because it's like really alien material to their the ecosystem. And then sometimes it's being done illegally, like driving somewhere in the periphery and dumping there. and there are also like the bigger city, the municipality of Istanbul, controlling the sites in Asian and the European part of Istanbul.
And we're kind of coming to like an end of your book, or an end of this talk, with like as I was reading through your like conclusions, I really like how you refer to like waste as a social spatial process.
Yeah.
So maybe could you like expand on that thought a little bit, and on also your like conclusions, or even, I don't know, challenges for future, or like recommendations, whatever comes to mind.
By saying it is as like a special process, it's beyond its material properties. It's something produced socially, and it occupies also a space that changes environments, changes how people live, changes the housing situation in this in the scale of building materials, let's say, or second-hand market, and it's kind of part of a bigger network of things, and which are kind of not visible to us, and the relations are more important, how human and non-human things are being related in that sense, and also I end up with questioning, okay, these materials are being produced, and it's not like a bigger profit from these materials are not that profitable, let's say, in terms of this capitalist perspective. Why can't be considered as commons, or why can't this be materials can be used as commons in terms of like a resource that kind of could be used for doing things more affordably, or affordable
outside of the profit ridden market.
And because like since I observed like in the Anatolian parts, there's this cooperative structure in this demolition firms, which are also doing the job of çıkmacıs in Istanbul. So Istanbul is so large, there are other shareholders for this work in Anatolian towns, which are also subject to the same urban transformation regulations, which kind of not depending on the seismic activity, but still like these are kind of have these cooperatives, and they kind of helping each other in terms of finding jobs, or like when there's workers scarce. So how could be a kind of a model, a cooperative model, was into question, because when I look at the Western examples, reuse is like kind of really trendy topic at the moment, especially like in Germany, Switzerland, Belgium. There are architecture companies who are kind of really focused on that more structurally, and like more kind of a business model, and they got funding, state funding for that. And it's really hard to interpret this, to have these examples to the Turkish context, because the dynamics are different. And so I was ending up with these questions of how can we learn from the way of çıkmacıs to be a model for a cooperative, which is kind of also supported with the state money, let's say, or kind of not part of a mechanism that is not easily get advantage of, or not easily corrupt in that sense. Yeah.
And how can we do that?
How can we do that? That's the question. And a cooperative model makes sense.
Are the cooperatives like recognized by law in Turkey?
Yes. Yes, but not, how can I say, not the way in Western cooperatives, and not the way it's kind of like again a solidarity situation. But for instance, like food cooperatives are very common in Turkey. Not to just to get rid of the big companies in the middle, and then to directly buy from the producer from local context. But in the building scale, it's kind of has to be kind of more structurally researched and structurally recognized in a way that. But most of the things how function in this gray zone is like mostly solidarity networks, which is coming from migration networks, and also some initiatives or NGOs like kind of in that support system. But it's not, it's a kind of a contra hegemonic structure, let's say.
But is this, like, let's say, a line of research something that you'd like to expand more in future, or you're like, as everyone who finishes their PhD, kind of sick of the of your old research topic?
Well, it keeps coming back to me, so I can't really avoid it. So I'm also left Turkey for good 5 years ago, unfortunately, because of this, because of the existing regime, and like there's this big wave of migration. So I migrate to Switzerland, and there I'm somehow kind of trying to develop a reuse concept for a cooperative, which is kind of occupying a factory, a textile factory, old textile factory, and within it they are using second-hand building materials to transform the space. So I'm kind of trying to be part of that, but just in the beginnings of something. But like the knowledge is different, what I learned from the PhD. So their expertise are more technical, like how things architecturally resolve, or like really technical level architecture problems, how we can use this frame there with a certain detail. And my experience, let's say, is more like kind of coming from more social side of waste, and there is kind of more practical in that sense. So I don't know how it will be working together, let's say. But for future research in Turkish context, it would be interesting to revisit like how this is going on, or like to contact with local municipality, Istanbul municipalities, to be more kind of like pushing it more to be more accessible, to kind of make an inventory of things, because it's really hard to get, for instance, to find about how many demolitions are made in a neighborhood. So it's always like this closed doors behind.
Word of mouth, you know.
And it's not like open resource, and this kind of information. And so it would be nice to kind of like work in that level, and more less trying to organize, or like more help the working conditions of the Çıkmacız.
Have you stayed in touch with your family, the family that you followed?
The last time we met, it was 2018, before I left. So it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And when you get into writing, at some point you start the flow of data, and you just start writing up the stuff. It's like very important to contact with them during the research, like to explain why I'm interested, because it was kind of, they didn't understand why I'm interested in this, because it's kind of like a really peripheral job, or like precarious job in the sector.
And why are you interested?
And why are you interested in that? You're architect, and it was really hard to like explain my position, and it was like kind of extended over like 5-6 years of research. And it was important to, like, as like documentary filmmakers, to revisit or to be present, and then to be like kind of have more relationship, because they were really surprised when I visited their village.
Were you helping like with physical labor on site? Or they didn't let you do it?
It's kind of really rough situation in demolition. Empty, abandoned building. No, but it's really heavy work, which I'm not used to, which I'm kind of like sitting on desk writing or like drawing as architects is like, but being on site was important, like to follow them and to ask questions, maybe during their breaks and eat something with together. But I didn't help them mostly. Yeah,
it seems like something
they helped
really
me in a sense, like because in parallel I have artistic practice, so I also reuse materials which is salvaged from buildings to contextualize in artworks, and mostly they help me, you know. I wish I could, but it's kind of like also you have to wear something, and because your hand easily gets scratched, or we are talking about really like they are like kind of supermen, and
it seems like there's a lot of skill involved in dismantling all of that.
Yeah, and it's like really like rubble, like everywhere is rubble. You have to be careful where you step at. There are like broken glass on the floor. It's just a really overwhelming place.
And I think like reading your book, that was very, it's really well written, and
thank you.
And all of that, how some building sites look dangerous, and how were you at times puzzled with what happened somewhere, and then got like a little bit more context. It's really there in the book. So because book will be out soon, actually by the end of October 2023.
Yes.
It will be open access, so all of our listeners can download and read. And there's a lot of pictures and diagrams that are very, very informative. Or I hope maybe inspire some research on similar kind of work in our context, because I think it's really, I mean, you and me, for people that don't know, and most of the people don't know, who will listen to this don't know, Onur and I actually met on RC21 summer school in Delhi. We were part of this like a group of young researchers that came there very enthusiastically to learn and share about our own PhD projects. And then, from that was in 2019, we are here now planning workshops and talking about our research together. And I hope our RC21 friends will listen to this.
Exactly. It's a big hi to them from here. And thanks for for this opportunity to this part of the workshop, and also this podcast, and like your attention to my work is really, thank you. I'm really
I always since 2019 I was super interested, because it really was something that I never heard of. And this as I'm also anthropologist, but interested in economy, but also architecture and or housing, this really puzzled me. And I was, this is something that's very, I don't know, connects all these things, how cities are being transformed, but also the informal labor and the role of international capital and precarious work. All of these pieces of puzzle are here in this one unusual research topic, that some people are working there, dismantling some PVC windows, not even knowing that their work is a metaphor of some really big thing going on in the global south.
Well, I don't think they're interested in that. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, of course. But
it's it's really thin. These relations are very also really fragile in that sense, to explain something, or this. Yeah, it's quite interesting what you encounter in the field, and what the conditions of people, or their daily rhythms, and this heavy work. And then you are, as a researcher there, it's it's really hard to position yourself, and it's a question of they helped me for many stuff. Was I be useful for them, in a sense that they see their jobs, or they can be organized themselves more better way that against asbestos, for instance, or like getting more information about like their work conditions, or
Yeah, that would probably require much more presence in the field and not only one researcher working on this topic.
And also, like, I'm now not living there anymore, and it's kind of also sad in that sense. Like, I'm also a bit far away, and
but let's hope the book will shed light on this topic, so maybe someone, like younger generations, can pick up and continue from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dakle, to je bila 22. epizoda Zvuka misli. Slušamo se u narednoj.